I never thought I'd be the guy with a broken heart, standing in the middle of my living room staring at the woman I thought I knew. But here I was in the middle of a mess, blindsided by the woman I married, Jessica. We had built a life together, or so I thought. 2 kids, a house, and the occasional neighborhood barbecue. But beneath that suburban facade, things were slowly crumbling. The signs were subtle at first. Jessica was spending more time on her phone, often scrolling through it during dinner, her eyes glued to the screen like it held the secrets of the universe. I joked with her about it, trying to lighten the mood, but she always brushed me off with a laugh that felt forced. "Just work stuff, babe," she'd say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to believe her. After all, she worked as a marketing manager and often had late calls with clients. Then there were the late meetings that crept into our routine. Hours stretched into the night without a word from her, and I'd be home alone, just me and the kids. I tried to ignore the growing distance. We were busy, I told myself, raising 2 boys who were deep into sports and school activities. But something nagged at me, a feeling that refused to go away. I can't pinpoint the exact moment the penny dropped. Maybe it was that Saturday afternoon when our son, Jake, came home from football practice, a strange look on his face. "Dad," Coach Mark was asking about Mom, he said, shrugging it off as if it was just a regular question. But my gut twisted at the mention of Mark, the football coach who seemed a bit too friendly with Jessica during the games. "What do you mean?" I pressed, trying to sound casual. Jake shrugged again, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Then came the day I discovered my wife was cheating. I was working a Saturday shift and decided to surprise Jessica by coming home early. I walked into the house, the air thick with silence. The kids were at their grandparents', so it was just me and Jessica. I called out her name, but got no response. A bad feeling crept over me as I moved through the house, each step echoing louder than asked. As I entered our bedroom, the sight that greeted me felt like a sledgehammer to my chest. There was Jessica lounging on our bed, her phone pressed to her ear, and there on the screen was Mark's name. The laughter that spilled from her lips as she chatted contributed to a sense of disbelief. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart racing. I had walked into my worst nightmare. She must have sensed my presence because she looked up, her expression shifting from shock to something else, defensiveness. "Guilt?" I couldn't tell. "Jake, I thought you were at practice." Her words tumbled out, frantic and desperate. I didn't give her a chance to spin a web of lies. I simply dropped the bomb. "I saw Mark's name on your phone, Jess. What the hell is going on?" Her reaction was immediate, a mix of denial and anger. "You're just being paranoid. Mark was just discussing Jake's performance. It's nothing." But I could see through her facade. The panic in her eyes was unmistakable. I pressed her harder, demanding the truth, waiting for the dam to break. In that moment, the air thick with tension, I realized. My world was crumbling. I felt rage bubbling beneath the surface, but more than that, I felt a profound sadness. The woman I thought I knew was lying to me, betraying everything we had built together. I didn't want to hear her excuses, but she launched into a litany of them anyway. "It's not what you think. We just connected, you know. You've been so busy with work, and I needed someone to talk to." The words cut deeper than any knife could. At moment I felt my heart split open, revealing a chasm of betrayal. How could she do this to us, to our family? The emotional impact hit like a freight train, leaving me reeling. I felt anger, sadness, and a sense of utter confusion. How had we gotten here? I needed to process everything. Jessica's excuses, her laughter echoing in my mind as she tried to play the victim. I could feel the walls closing in on me, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a dark path I had to navigate. Would I confront her further? Would I blow the lid off her lies? Would I seek revenge? I was at a crossroads, and I needed to make a decision about how to move forward. The confrontation left me disoriented, standing in the middle of our bedroom like a deer caught in headlights. Jessica's frantic attempts to justify her actions were just noise now, each excuse further distancing me from the woman I once loved. I could see her scrambling for words, but nothing she said mattered. My world had shifted on its axis, and I felt a dragon awakening within me, fueled by hurt and betrayal. After she finished her tirade, I remained silent. I needed to collect my thoughts to process the avalanche of emotions crashing over me. I could feel the rage bubbling under the surface, ready to erupt. I took a deep breath and focused on the bigger picture, our kids, our life together. I was angry, but deep down, I was also shattered. Do you realize what you've done? I finally managed to say, my voice low and trembling with barely contained fury. This isn't just some fling, Jessica. This is our family. She rolled her eyes, the irritation clear on her face. You're overreacting. It's not that serious. That response felt like a punch to the gut. How could she belittle this? I had just watched the foundation of our marriage crumble, and she was acting like it was just a minor inconvenience. In her eyes, I could see the truth. She didn't care. This was about her getting what she wanted, and everything else was collateral damage. I felt the weight of every moment we had shared, every promise we made, come crashing down. I thought about our wedding vows, about the dreams we built together. They felt like a distant memory now. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to regain some composure. I need some space, I said, stepping back and avoiding her gaze. I turned to leave the room, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere. I could hear her calling after me, trying to grab my arm, but I shook her off. Don't. Just don't. I went straight to the living room, pacing like a caged animal. My mind raced. What should I do next? My first instinct was to confront Mark, the man who had crossed a line he had no business crossing. But I wanted to do it in a way that would make a statement, that would reverberate through the community. I'd make sure everyone knew who he truly was. But first I needed to gather evidence, something concrete that would show Jessica and everyone else the truth. I started by going through our home office. I dug through drawers, rifled through old bills, and finally there it was, an envelope with her handwriting on it. I opened it to find a series of texts printed out, receipts for dinners, and a few steamy messages that made my stomach turn. How could she be so brazen? Armed with this evidence, I felt a sense of purpose igniting inside me. I had no idea how deep this affair went, but I knew I had to expose it. As I pieced everything together, I felt a mix of anger and determination. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her get away with this. The next day, I made my way to the local sports complex where Jake played football. Mark had been a coach there for years, and I knew he had a solid reputation among the parents. I couldn't let that deceive me any longer. I approached a few fellow dads, casually asking about Mark. Hey, how's the season been? That new coach seems pretty cool, right? The responses I got were overwhelmingly positive. Mark was popular. He was considered a good mentor and a role model. Frustration bubbled within me as I realized how easy it was for my wife to manipulate the situation. But I knew what I had to do. The next step in my plan was to set up a meeting with the sports association. I composed a detailed email outlining my concerns about Mark's conduct, referencing the texts and evidence I had collected. I wanted to ensure they knew this was not just a personal vendetta. I was looking out for the kids' welfare. With a few strategically placed comments, I wanted them to question his character and ultimately push for his removal. As I clicked send, adrenaline coursed through my veins. I felt like a new man, fueled by a mix of anger and determination, a man ready to take back control of his life. I was going to expose Mark for who he really was, and my wife's betrayal would become the catalyst for change. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a long, tumultuous journey. The emotional fallout would be more than I ever anticipated, and my revenge would lead me down a path I had never imagined. The war was just beginning, and I was prepared to fight for my family, whatever the cost. The aftermath of my decision to expose Mark felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. I had sent that email with a sense of urgency, but also a twinge of doubt. I knew that once I set this ball rolling, there was no stopping it. I was determined to see this through, but I also felt a weight pressing down on me. Each passing hour felt like an eternity as I waited for a response from the sports association. While I waited, I tried to keep things as normal as possible at home. I avoided conversations with Jessica. Anytime she attempted to engage with me, I simply gave her short replies. I could see the confusion on her face, but I wasn't ready to explain myself. I was processing my own pain, and the thought of discussing her betrayal felt impossible. I wanted her to sit in the silence of her guilt, to reflect on her actions. The next few days dragged on as I went through the motions of family life, taking the kids to school, attending soccer practices, and pretending everything was fine. But in the back of my mind, I was consumed with thoughts of revenge. I needed to make sure Mark faced the consequences of his actions, and I would not rest until he did. Finally, I received an email back from the sports association. They wanted to meet with me to discuss my concerns further. I felt a rush of adrenaline at the prospect of finally confronting them with my evidence. I prepared meticulously for that meeting, gathering all the texts and receipts, and even jotting down notes on what I wanted to say. I wanted to make it clear that this wasn't just about me. It was about the impact on our children and the families involved. On the day of the meeting, I walked into the conference room feeling tense but resolute. A few board members were present, along with the director of the program. They greeted me with cautious smiles, their demeanor professional and serious. I took a seat at the table, my heart racing as I laid out everything I had discovered about Mark's behavior. I detailed the timeline of events, emphasizing the inappropriate messages and how they had affected my marriage and my family. As I spoke, I felt a surge of empowerment. Here I was, taking a stand not just for myself but for other parents who might have experienced similar situations. The board listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. I could see they were taking my allegations seriously, and that only fueled my conviction. After I finished speaking, they began asking questions, and I could tell they were weighing my words carefully. One board member, a father of one of the players, frowned as he asked, "Did you confront Mark about this before bringing it to us?" I shook my head. "No, I felt it was important to bring this to your attention first. He has access to our kids, and I didn't want to put them at risk." The conversation continued, and I saw the board members exchanging glances, processing everything I had laid out. Finally, they thanked me for coming forward and assured me they would conduct an investigation into the allegations. I left the meeting feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. I had done my part, but what would happen next? Would they confront Mark? Would he deny everything? As I drove home, I felt a sense of purpose merging with a newfound sadness. I was doing the right thing, but it didn't change the fact that my marriage was in tatters. Jessica was still at home, and I knew that the confrontation was inevitable. I had to face her and explain what I had done, what I was trying to achieve. When I walked through the front door, I found Jessica sitting on the couch, her face buried in her phone. The moment I walked in, she looked up, her expression shifting to one of concern. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a seat across from her, folding my hands together. "I reported Mark. They're investigating." Her eyes widened. "You did what?" There was a hint of panic in her tone, and I could see the reality of the situation dawning on her. "Jessica, you need to understand what you've done. I didn't want to take this route, but you left me no choice. You cheated on me, and now I'm taking steps to protect our family." She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised my hand to cut her off. "Save it. I don't want to hear the excuses again. You made your choice, and now I have to make mine. I won't let Mark put our kids at risk." She fell silent, and for a moment we sat in an uncomfortable stillness. I could see her processing everything, and part of me felt a small degree of satisfaction knowing that the truth was unraveling. But another part of me was exhausted from the emotional toll this whole situation had taken. As the days passed, the tension in the house intensified. Jessica tried to engage with me, to reach out in small ways, but I couldn't let my guard down. I was still hurting, and each time she attempted to bridge the gap, I felt the walls going up even higher. I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal that loomed over our conversations. In the back of my mind, I wondered how long it would take for the sports association to reach a conclusion on their investigation. Would Mark be removed from his position? Would he face consequences? It felt like the pieces of this puzzle were slowly coming together, but I couldn't deny the emotional mess that I was still navigating. And then, one evening, I received a call from the sports association. The moment I saw their number on my phone, my heart raced again, and I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what would come next. "Hello, is this Jake?" The voice on the other end started, and I knew this conversation would change everything. "Is this Jake?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady as I processed the significance of this call. "Yes, this is Jake." The voice on the other end belonged to the director of the sports association, and I instantly felt a rush of anxiety mixed with anticipation. My heart raced as I prepared for the news that would follow. "Thank you for your patience during our investigation into your concerns regarding Coach Mark," she began. "We've taken your allegations very seriously and have been gathering information from multiple sources." I barely managed to nod as if she could see me, my mind racing with scenarios. I had poured my heart into that meeting, detailing everything I had discovered. I was prepared for pushback, but I hadn't expected a waffling response. She continued, "After reviewing the evidence and speaking with other parents and coaches, we have decided to suspend Coach Mark pending further investigation." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a sense of dread. "Suspended?" I echoed, trying to process what that meant. "What does that entail?" "There will be a formal review, and we'll be reaching out to the parents of the players involved to discuss this matter further. For now, Coach Mark will not be coaching or interacting with the children until we conclude our findings." I nodded, feeling a combination of victory and uncertainty. "Thank you for taking this seriously." "Of course," she said. "We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. It's vital for us to maintain a safe environment for the kids." As we ended the call, I felt a knot in my stomach loosen slightly. Mark was suspended. At least that was one step in the right direction. Yet, I knew this was just the beginning. The fallout would stretch beyond just Mark's coaching career. It would affect our families, the kids, and me and Jessica. I stepped out to the backyard, needing some air. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow across the sky, but I felt far from warm inside. I took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. This wasn't just about the affair. This was about family, trust, and the innocent lives caught in the crossfire. As I stood there, I could hear Jessica's voice calling from behind me. "Jake, can we talk?" I turned to face her, my heart racing again. "What's there to talk about?" She stepped closer, her expression a mix of anxiety and something softer. "I know things have been tense and I get that I messed up, but I truly want to understand why you felt you had to go this far." I took a deep breath, anger creeping back in. "You want to understand. You cheated on me, Jessica. You betrayed our family. Do you really think I'd sit back while someone puts our children at risk?" She flinched at my words, but I pressed on. "You think this is just about you and me? It's not. This is about our kids, their safety, and their future. That's what I'm fighting for." Her eyes were welling up with tears, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm scared. I don't want to lose everything we have." "Everything we have," I shot back. "You're the one who put it all at risk. You're the one who got involved with Mark while I was busy working to provide for us. You think I wanted to come home to this mess?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off again. "You need to understand, this is not just about us anymore. I'm not sure I can look at you the same way again." The pain on her face was palpable, but I was too far gone. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and each word I said was pushing me closer to a decision I wasn't ready to face. As she fell silent, the tension between us thickened. I turned away again, not ready to deal with her emotions or my own. I needed to think, to gather my thoughts. The next few days were a whirlwind. I focused on the boys, ensuring they remained shielded from the chaos engulfing our lives. I didn't want them to see the strain in our marriage or sense the tension looming in the air. I took them to practice, cheered from the sidelines, and engaged in their lives as best I could. But in the back of my mind, a storm was brewing. I knew Jessica was struggling too. She attempted to reach out, tried to engage with me, but every time she approached, I felt the wall I had built around myself grow thicker. I was angry, disappointed, and disgusted, but more than that, I was heartbroken. I just couldn't shake off the betrayal. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard Jessica crying softly in the bathroom. At that moment, I felt a wave of empathy wash over me. Despite everything, she was still my wife, the mother of my children. But the memories of her betrayal were still fresh, and it felt like a chasm had opened between us that couldn't be crossed. "Jessica," I called softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond immediately, and after a moment she finally emerged, her eyes red and puffy. I'm sorry, Jake. I never meant for any of this to happen. I sighed deeply, frustration boiling over again. But it did happen, and now our lives are shattered. What do you want me to say? I just want you to understand how sorry I am, she pleaded. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation, but I knew that fixing this wasn't going to be easy. Trust had been broken, and it would take time, if it could even be repaired at all. I felt the weight of her gaze on me, as if she was searching for something in my eyes, a glimmer of hope maybe. But I wasn't sure I could give her that. Instead, my mind spiraled into thoughts of revenge. I had exposed Mark, but I needed to push further. I wanted to ensure that the repercussions of his actions echoed through the community. He had to pay for his role in this betrayal, and it was time to make that happen. I had a plan, a way to ensure that Mark faced not just professional consequences but personal ones as well. He had put his hands on what was mine, and it was time to take back control of my life. I needed to find a way to destroy his reputation and ensure he never coached again, and I would make that happen. As the days passed, I found myself entrapped in a whirlwind of anger and determination. The initial relief of Mark's suspension had faded, but the fire igniting my desire for revenge had only grown stronger. I needed to ensure that the consequences of his actions would ripple through his life, affecting not only him, but also anyone who dared to cross the line with my family. I started to gather information about Mark, anything that could be used against him. I tapped into my network of fellow parents and reached out to anyone who might have had a bad experience with him. I wanted to build a case that would make it impossible for him to return to coaching, and it wasn't long before I found some dirt. A few parents mentioned rumors about Mark's questionable conduct with other students in past seasons. There were whispers about him being overly familiar with certain girls on the team, crossing boundaries that should never have been crossed. I felt a rush of vindication as I collected these stories. They provided the ammunition I needed to escalate my efforts and make my case against him even stronger. One evening, I met with a dad from the football team, Dave, who had been there longer than I had. We grabbed a drink at a local pub, and I decided to broach the subject. Hey, what do you think about Mark? I know he's been coaching for a while, but I've heard some troubling things about him. Dave's face darkened, and he leaned closer, lowering his voice. I've heard a couple of things, too. Last season, there were some parents worried about how he interacted with their daughters. It was brushed off, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. I felt a jolt of energy course through me as I listened. Do you think there's any validity to it? He nodded gravely. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. You know how these things go, people get scared to speak up. But if you're looking into it, I'll back you up. I'll stand by you if you want to take this further. It was like a light bulb flicked on in my mind. What if we compiled everything we have and approached the association together? If more parents voice their concerns, maybe we can finally ensure he's out for good. Dave agreed, and we spent the next few days gathering testimonies from other parents. Each story added fuel to the fire. I felt a sense of camaraderie forming among us, parents who wanted to protect our kids from a predator hiding behind the facade of a respected coach. The more I learned, the more my resolve hardened. We had to act fast, especially while the association was still investigating. At home, things with Jessica grew increasingly strained. I kept my distance, focused entirely on my mission. She tried to reach out, but every time she opened her mouth to speak, I felt the anger bubbling back up. I wasn't ready to forgive, let alone forget. The more I immersed myself in the efforts against Mark, the more I felt like I was reclaiming control over my life. Finally, the day arrived when we had enough evidence to present to the sports association. We organized a meeting, and I arrived with a suitcase full of testimonies, texts, and accounts from parents willing to support our claims. With every name I collected, I felt a twinge of satisfaction. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting our kids. When I walked into the conference room again, the atmosphere felt charged. The board members looked more serious than before. We laid everything out on the table, the testimonies, the troubling behaviors, and the impact on our families. I watched the board exchange worried glances as we detailed Mark's past conduct. As I spoke, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. This was no longer just about my wife's affair. It was about ensuring that no other parent would have to confront this kind of betrayal. I wanted to be the voice for the kids who couldn't protect themselves. After our presentation, one of the board members asked, "Are there any specific incidents you can point to that occurred while Mark was coaching?" That's when Dave spoke up. "I can share a couple of instances where he made parents uncomfortable. I specifically recall a game last season where Mark was seen giving players inappropriate hugs, and parents were discussing how it crossed a line." Another parent chimed in, "I overheard him comment on a player's appearance. It wasn't just friendly banter, it felt predatory." The tension in the room thickened as more parents added their accounts. The board members nodded, taking notes and expressing their concern. When we wrapped up, they thanked us for coming forward and assured us they would take our allegations seriously. As I left the meeting, a sense of relief washed over me. We had done our part, and I felt like I had put Mark's career in jeopardy. But there was still one piece of unfinished business: Jessica. When I returned home, Jessica was waiting for me, her expression a mix of anxiety and hope. "How did it go?" I took a deep breath, feeling the exhaustion wash over me. "We presented our case. A lot of parents backed me up. We're hoping for a decision soon, but it could take some time." Her eyes widened, and I could see a flicker of relief on her face. "That's good, right? Maybe this will lead to some accountability for him." I nodded, but the bitter taste of betrayal still lingered in my mouth. "Yeah, but it's not just about Mark anymore, Jess. I still don't know where we stand." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the weight of her gaze, the desperation for understanding, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down. I had gone through too much, and the wounds were still fresh. "Jake, I know I messed up, but I want to work on this. I want you to give me a chance to show you I can change." I shook my head. "I don't know if I can do that right now. Trust is hard to earn back, especially after what you did." Her face fell, and I felt a pang of guilt, but I couldn't allow her words to sway me. I was still in the midst of my own turmoil, navigating the wreckage of our relationship while simultaneously fighting for justice. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself juggling my responsibilities as a father, my role in this war against Mark, and the emotional fallout at home with Jessica. I was exhausted, but I was also determined. I wouldn't let my family, my kids, or myself suffer any longer under the weight of this betrayal. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and I could feel the storm building. The next steps in this battle would determine not just Mark's fate, but also mine and Jessica. Would I find closure, or would I have to confront the mess that our lives had become? Only time would tell, and I was prepared for whatever came next. Weeks passed, and the tension in our house felt like a taut wire ready to snap. My efforts to expose Mark were consuming my thoughts, and I found myself constantly waiting for the sports association to make their decision. Each passing day felt like a lifetime as I juggled the emotional fallout of Jessica's betrayal and the anticipation of what would come next. Finally, I received the call I had been waiting for. The sports association was ready to announce their decision regarding Mark's future with the program. My heart raced as I prepared myself for the worst and the best. I gathered the boys, trying to keep my face neutral, though I was anything but calm. When I arrived at the sports complex, a crowd had gathered. Parents were milling about, some with concerned expressions, others chatting amongst themselves, unaware of the details. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I hadn't just implicated Mark, I had stirred the pot of our entire community. The meeting started, and the board chairman stood at the podium. "Thank you all for coming today. We appreciate your patience as we conducted our thorough investigation into the allegations brought forward regarding Coach Mark. After careful consideration and review of the evidence and testimonies, we have decided to terminate Mark's position as a coach for our youth football program effective immediately." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd, and I felt a strange mix of vindication and guilt wash over me. Mark was gone, and I had played a significant role in that. I glanced around, noticing some parents exchanging relieved smiles while others looked shocked or disappointed. I hadn't anticipated that Mark would have his supporters, but I supposed every betrayal had its defenders. As the meeting adjourned, I hung back, letting the crowd disperse while I processed what had just happened. I had succeeded in my mission. Mark was out of the picture, but that victory felt bittersweet. I hadn't just affected his career, I had disrupted the lives of many in our community, including my own family. When I returned home, the house was quiet, too quiet. Jessica was waiting for me, her eyes searching mine. "How did it go?" I took a deep breath. "They fired him. Mark's not coaching anymore." Her expression flickered, a mixture of relief and something else, a hint of uncertainty. "What now?" she asked, stepping closer, her hands clasped in front of her. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. "Now we need to talk about us." I had spent so much time fixated on revenge that I hadn't dealt with the fallout of our marriage. I wasn't sure what I needed to say, but I knew I had to confront the reality of our situation. "This won't fix everything, Jess. You broke my trust and I don't know how to get that back." "I understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I messed up and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I didn't think I'd lose everything like this." I watched her, searching for sincerity in her eyes, the depth of her remorse. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that we could find a path back to each other, but the other part was still raw, still aching from the betrayal. "I need time, Jessica. This isn't something I can just forget. You hurt me deeply." Her shoulders sagged, and I could see the weight of my words settling on her. "I know. I just hope you'll want to try again someday." Instead of responding, I turned away, needing air, needing space. Stepping outside, I felt the cool evening breeze against my skin. I looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling like distant memories. I thought about what our future might hold, and whether we could forge a new path together or if we were irrevocably broken. Over the next few days, I began to piece my life back together. I focused on the boys, pouring my energy into being the father they needed and deserved. We spent time playing catch in the yard, going to the park, and enjoying the little moments that made life precious. The boys were my anchor, reminding me of what truly mattered. As for Jessica, we had a tentative agreement to coexist without conflict while I sorted through my feelings. We talked occasionally, and while the conversations were awkward and tinged with unresolved tension, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. She was making an effort, apologizing, being attentive, and trying to engage with the boys more. But forgiveness would take time, and I wasn't ready to rush into decisions. I began to realize that my feelings toward her were complex. I was angry and hurt, but I also missed the connection we had shared. Perhaps one day we could rebuild that, but it would start with honest conversations and time apart. In the weeks following Mark's dismissal, I continued to reflect on the lessons learned. I realized that life was fragile and relationships required constant nurturing. Betrayal could tear apart even the strongest bonds, but it also opened a window for growth. I had to focus on the future, on healing rather than dwelling on the past. I had exposed Mark, but the real challenge lay in rebuilding my life. I learned that revenge, while momentarily satisfying, did not bring lasting peace. Instead, I found solace in being a devoted father and a better version of myself. One step at a time, I would navigate this journey of healing and rediscovery, knowing that no matter what happened, I had the power to shape my own destiny. In the end, I stood at a crossroads, one path leading to the past and the pain of betrayal, the other leading to an uncertain future filled with possibility. I chose to forge ahead, to prioritize my family, and to embrace the journey, wherever it might lead me.